You're listening to The Other 50%, a herstory of Hollywood. I'm Julie Harris Walker. This is the podcast where I talk to successful women in entertainment and hear their stories. Our presenting sponsor is the end-to-end production solution, Green Slate. Whether it's start paperwork, time cards, purchase orders, or reports, everything is digital, everything is on the app, and you can work from wherever you are. You can do it on your phone, on your iPad, on your desktop. The future is actually here. And if you'd like to hear this pitch in person or see it for yourself, call me and I will come over. I'm working there as the Senior Vice President of West Coast Operations. My number is 310-789-2001, extension 323, or jhw@gslate.com. Okay, so I'm sitting with Sonia Maru, and you're going to tell me about the Los Angeles Diversity Film Festival that's happening next week.
I am. I've been the festival director for LADFF for 3 years. This is our 6th year running as a festival, and we hold it in WeHo every year in the summer, and it's a super fun, inspiring event.
Now, how did it come about in the first place?
Well, the founder, Hollis McLaughlin, is a special ed teacher, an actress, writer, producer, and she just saw this need for a diversity film festival instead of, just LGBTQ, just women's issues, all of these different groups that already have these amazing festivals. She was like, let's do something that encompasses everybody. And one of the main things, because we actually both have a background in special ed teaching, was people with disabilities and the lack of representation, and especially the lack of fair and accurate representation. So that was like something that she wanted to champion along with the rest of diversity.
Yeah, wonderful, because that's like the least represented group now, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, right now there's like a ton of buzz around it, obviously, and that's great.
And a few great shows happening.
Exactly, yeah. No, people are like taking action and putting these great characters on screen, and also great people behind the camera, writing and directing and being on crews and everything. But yeah, I think 6 years ago, it was kind of an innovative idea that people weren't totally clued into yet. Mm-hmm. So I think that's one of the things that makes it extra special. But centering our festival around diversity is cool in general because, we have a block that can have just all of these different ideas presented and these different people, and you see like how they're really similar and how their struggles and their ideas support each other, and they're not, they need to be segregated.
Like the humanity that runs under all of it. So what can we expect to see there? Is it shorts? Is it features? What is it?
Every year is a little different because, we're at the mercy of what's submitted, which is always great stuff. This year's almost all shorts. We only have one feature, and it's a world premiere. It's a narrative scripted feature called The Extraordinary Ordinary. But then the rest is all shorts. So we have 6 other blocks that are all groups of shorts.
Okay, and tell us the dates.
It's August 22nd through 24th.
And where can we buy tickets?
At ladff.com.
Okay, I will link to it.
Yeah, and you can read about all the films, decide which blocks are the most interesting to you, or decide to come to all of them.
Just spend 3 days.
Exactly. I mean, it's a great time.
What's the venue?
We're at the Let Live Theater. It's on Formosa, just south of Santa Monica in West Hollywood.
That sounds like an appropriate venue.
Yeah, and it's right around the corner from the newly reopened Formosa Cafe.
Oh, yes, so you can stop by there for lunch.
Historic Hollywood spot, yeah.
Yeah, and then the next day you can go to Jones across the street.
Yeah, exactly. It's actually a great little spot, and it's not busy, and the parking's easy. It's a lot simpler than like the heart of WeHo.
Okay, so everybody should go.
Yeah, absolutely.
What else do you want to tell us about it?
Well, you can always follow us on social media. Instagram is LA Diversity, and Facebook, you can just look up the Los Angeles Diversity Film Festival. We're always posting. We have a trailer coming out. We do our own podcast, actually, called Film Forward. So we profiled, did interviews with 10 of the filmmakers from this year's festival. So we'll be rolling those out over the next month. Some are already out.
And is that on like Apple Podcasts and all the podcast places?
All the podcast places. You can also find it on our website, ladff.com. And yeah, our programmer, Nick, runs that, and he is like a movie junkie cinephile. So he just talks movies and talks shop and talks, diversity, and it's really cool.
Delicious.
So,
okay, go listen to that too.
Yeah, after you listen to this one.
Of course. After this 50%. One. Put it on your play next.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you, Sonia.
Yeah, thank you.
For today's episode, I got to speak with Eleanor Wells. Eleanor was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and was a lover of film writing and storytelling from an early age. She has written and directed several short films, including Feature Presentation, about three lonely people in need of connection who find it at the movies, as well as Tales from the Airwaves, a Mercury Theater-esque radio drama. She fell in love with the classics as a teenager and is especially interested in portraying other eras. She firmly believes storytelling is one of the most powerful tools we have to empathize with and understand the lives of others. We're not arguing with that. She tells us all about her current film, Eagle Rock, which dives deep into the psychology of what might make a young woman join a cult. It's pretty fascinating. You can find us at theother50%.com for added features, photos, show notes, and the merchandise. I have very cool coffee cups and tumblers. You can also listen on Apple Podcasts and all the podcast places. Also, the full season of Catch a Break, The Insider's Guide to Getting Into and Navigating Hollywood, is available on Apple Podcasts and all the podcast places, and on the website, catchabreakpodcast.com. Go check that one out too. And we have just wrapped recording for season 2, and I have to tell you, it is really good. I have never been so proud of a project. We have some amazing guests and so much great information. I'll keep you posted as to when it will launch. All right, here's my conversation with Eleanor Wells. Have a listen. What do you do?
I am a writer-director.
And you are in the middle of working on a film right now, aren't you?
I am, yeah. We just actually finished shooting.
Tell me all about it.
So it's called Eagle Rock. It takes place in the late 1960s and early 1970s over the course of several years. And it is about a young woman living in Bozeman, Montana. And she's finishing up her senior year of high school. And she meets this charismatic older man and is drawn into him and is very enamored with him. And it turns out he's not the person that she thinks that he is. And later on, they're on the road, just kind of living in nature and never staying in one place for too long. And later on, they pick up another girl her age hitchhiking. And there are some flash forwards to a few years in the future to find out that these two young women were the first members of a cult.
Ooh, interesting. Is this a full-length feature or a short?
It's a short film. So it's a longer short film. It'll probably be about 20, 25 minutes.
Oh, that's great. And so you finished shooting? Are you in post right now?
I finished shooting. So we shot the bulk of our film. We were in Bozeman and the kind of surrounding areas in the first week of May, which was an amazing experience. And we finished up 2 additional scenes in LA at the beginning of June. So now we're in post-production.
That's great. And how was the process?
It was, it was hard. I mean, there were a lot of challenges that came up, particularly with money and with, not always knowing what to do in certain situations or just trying to have to, make adjustments here and there. Just everything that normally comes up when you're making a film. But
yeah, it's so hard.
Mm-hmm. And, when we were on set, they like being late or running behind schedule. But ultimately, everything we got everything shot that we needed to get shot and that we wanted. And, the footage looks beautiful and everyone was really great to work with. I had a really great cast and crew. And I think everything turned out really well in the end.
Wonderful. How did you raise the money for it?
So we did crowdfunding. So we did 2 sort of stages of crowdfunding. We did our first round on Seed and Spark, and we did our second round on GoFundMe. So altogether, it was about $8,000. That was a whole process. But, I learned a lot. I learned a lot about like social media marketing too, which was a lot of fun. But yeah, I didn't really know what I was doing, but we kind of just figured it out as we went along.
What are some of the things you learned through the crowdfunding process? What do you wish you had known going in?
Oh, goodness. That's a good question. Probably just kind of don't beg, I guess, or if there's a process to when you post and what you post. And I find engaging the potential donors as much as possible. This is kind of the context of the film, or this is a little bit about the character. This is a little bit about the inspiration. And I think people are very receptive to that because people are very receptive to passion and interest. And they see this and it's oh, I can tell the story means a lot to her and means a lot to the cast and crew that she's brought on board, and they've thought a lot about this, and it seems like it'll be a cool film, and she's done her research, so I'm going to give her a little something. And just posting like stills or little blurbs. I mean, this is a historical film, and it's, you know, fictional characters but it's based off of real historical events, so just sharing a little bit about that. Like I said, I found that people are very receptive to. So engaging them as much as possible, and like kind of framing it in the sense of you will have a really great viewing experience with this film once it's released.
So what is the real cult it was based on?
Mainly Charles Manson, but there were a little bit of shades of Jonestown and some David Koresh in there too. I mean, I did a lot of research into a lot of different cults, but those were, I would say Manson and Jonestown are the main two that I researched and spent the most time in.
What got you interested in this?
So, it's a funny story. There was a book that came out a couple of years ago, called The Girls. It was by Emma Klein, and it was kind of a fictionalization of the Manson family. And I read it, one summer. I think I bought it because I was going to go on a long plane ride, and it was at the airport bookstore, and I'm like, oh, I've been hearing a lot about this book, so I'll check it out. I went in knowing nothing about Charles Manson or any cults, really. I was vaguely aware of who he was as like a historical figure, and then I knew it was fictional characters, but based off of that story, and I really liked the book, and I just kind of I just couldn't put it down. And then I was like, oh my God, I have to know more about the real story. So I did as much, you know, Googling and research as I could just because I was so fascinated. And what I didn't know is that Manson well, it's not entirely true, but the murders that their cult is most famous for, he did not commit himself. He sent 3 girls and 1 guy to do it in his place. And they were all, you know, college age, like my age and younger, a little older, but they were basically about my age. And, you know, just reading about some of their stories, I was really fascinated by them. And basically how, to backtrack a little bit, basically how The Girls is framed, it's from the perspective of a new recruit to this cult. And she's she's 14. So she very much admires, these older 19, 20-year-old girls that are kind of his most, this cult leader's most devoted followers, and she's very enamored with them, and fascinated by them. So I was drawn to their characters when I was reading that book. I was like, oh, I would like to maybe see the story from the point of view of the other girls. So I think that was the first seed, of the script for me. And yeah, and then basically just research and more research because I was so fascinated. But then when I heard about the real Manson girls, I saw a lot of myself in them, and I saw a lot of just the, I guess, growing pains of being a young adult. And it makes sense to me why, you know, they were enamored with Charles Manson and thought, you know, he was the answer to their problems. And I was really fascinated by that. And the script just kind of developed from there.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Just like the psychological study of what takes people to the point of, you know, admiring someone to going to commit a murder for them. Like it's so interesting. Like what flips that switch? And I imagine it's a slower burn than flipping a switch.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And with these girls, it was over, you know, a period of several years. And I've seen a lot of, you know, just sort of discourse where people are like, oh, like there's just this general attitude that people who get involved with cults are like, you know, there's something wrong with them, or they're not like us and they won't be anything like us. And actually, Jonestown is really interesting because a lot of, you know, that cult was much larger. And, you know, there were thousands of people that came and went over the years. And even a lot of the survivors of that tragedy said, you know, when they got back, you know, they were just kind of a joke. And they, you know, had gone through this horrible traumatic experience and nobody really like listened to them or took them seriously. And they were just kind of ostracized from everybody else. And they'd lost a lot of their good friends, and they just didn't really have a home. And even with Heaven's Gate, in the late 90s, which was
At the Waco?
No, not Waco. So Heaven's Gate was a different cult, and they basically all committed mass suicide. It was 39 of them, and they thought they were gonna, be one with this spaceship.
Oh,
and they
that's
thought,
right.
Yeah, and like, it's this horror. I mean, it's so bizarre. I mean, it's objectively very bizarre, but, you know, you look at the people that died and there are these very human stories, in all of them, and they were just kind of a joke too. everybody laughed about their haircuts and their outfits and just how absurd the whole thing was. But no one ever really stopped to kind of look at the human element of these people that had died and what they were looking for that they found in Marshall Applewhite. And, I can give stories of a million different cults, and I did research a lot of them. And what I found is, even though like the details and the names and, the ideologies or whatever are different, I feel like it's a lot of it keeps going back to the same things. And that's what I found in my research.
And what do you think that thing is? What do you think that the people are looking for, and what do you think that leader provides?
Mm-hmm. I think love and acceptance and feeling like you belong. When I was growing up, I feel like everybody goes through this when they're, 16, 17, whatever. I just felt very lost and isolated, and I didn't feel like I really belonged anywhere. And I just, I grew up in a small town in Wisconsin, and I wanted anything but that life. I would walk down the streets some days or walk home from school and be like, there has to be more to life than this. And especially when you're that age, you think you think you're mature, and in some ways you are, but then there's a lot like you have to learn about the world that you haven't realized yet. So when somebody comes in and tells you you're loved, you matter, it makes sense to me. And, it's not just teenagers. I mean, adults too. Maybe somebody like Carolyn Layton in Jonestown, just not, missing she was married and going to start a family, and she was this preacher's daughter. And, she found something in Jim Jones that wasn't there. And, she was, in her late 20s. And, there were other adults that all came just looking for a place where they could feel loved and accepted. And I think that's the main thing.
Now, let's talk about your background a little bit that led to you making a film. How and
Sure.
When did you know you were a filmmaker?
So the filmmaking thing started maybe junior, senior year of high school, actually. But I've always been a storyteller. I've always been a writer. Ever since I was maybe 4 or 5, I would watch Disney movies, and then I would come up, with my own princess stories, because that's what you do when you're 4 and 5. And I would just, some of my earliest memories are, being in front of the TV and, watching all these different movies, some by myself, some, with my mom and my brother, others with my dad. And Disney was a really big influence on me early on. And when I got older, maybe I was about 13. I became familiar with the AFI's, 100 years, 100 movies lists, and I decided I wanted to watch all of them.
Oh.
And there was a library in walking distance from my house, and I would go, I think one summer I just went and just rented all these movies from the library. Like I watched Casablanca, Gone with the Wind, To Kill a Mockingbird, Citizen Kane, and a lot of other movies on that list. And I've since seen more of them, but I think that really instilled in me a sense of appreciation for, the industry and the medium and its power. And I remember, even before that, watching a movie like Titanic. I think I was 11 when I first saw that movie, and watching it and just really connecting with all of the characters and not really ever thinking about the fact that this was this distant time period from our own. And I think I was sort of reflecting on it later, and I was thinking, like, if a movie can do that, then they must, have this tremendous power. Mm-hmm. And before that, I'd always, I'd read books. I was a really avid reader. I just loved stories. But I think there was something about filmmaking as a medium that I was just really called to. And I slowly discovered that, in my high school experience, and realizing that, filmmaking was kind of what I wanted to do in the medium that I wanted to use to tell stories. But I kind of always knew that I was a storyteller.
Well, it sounds like you gave yourself your own film appreciation education.
Yeah, absolutely.
What did you do after high school?
So I went to Emerson College for production in Boston. So that was a really great experience. And then I really got like a film education, because I had done one film through Milwaukee Film, that I had written the screenplay for and was actually directed by somebody else. And that was a really great experience, and it taught me a lot. And I think it was a good, good primer for going into college. So I was in Boston for 3 years, really. And by then I knew like I wanted to be a director. And, I took film history classes and production classes and just learned about, the craft and the medium and met lots of really cool people and had really great experiences. And I did the LA program my last semester. So I graduated a semester early. So I did that in December 2017 and graduated officially in May 2018. And yeah, I've just kind of been doing my thing ever since.
So did you do that Emerson thing, which is come to LA for that semester in Hollywood and then stay?
I did, yes.
And then what did you do when you graduated?
So I worked at a post-production company in Venice for 3 months and then just did a wide variety of odd jobs. And, kind of in my downtime, I was developing the script for this, which started around last summer. And that's kind of been my main thing. I've done a lot of different jobs, but you gotta get the rent paid and gotta get food on the table.
That's right. And gotta make your movie.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me, what is your big goal, your big dream?
So I want to write and direct feature film, and I want to have a wide, I just want my films and the stories that I tell to have a wide reach, because I think about, the movies that I watched growing up and how they affected me. And, I think, like I said, I think filmmaking has tremendous power, and I want to be a part of that. And I want for my films and the stories that I tell to be thought-provoking in a way and make people think about their own lives and maybe change their mind about certain things. And I think just, I don't need like personal recognition necessarily I'd be fine if I go, through my entire life and nobody recognizes me when I walk down the street, but if somebody, recognizes my film or sees my film and connects with it and, understands it, then I'll felt like I've done my job and achieved what I have set out on this crazy journey to accomplish. And then that's not just for Eagle Rock, it's for all future films that I make too, because I'd really like to do a feature after this.
Are you working on a bunch of scripts?
Yeah, so I have quite a few different ideas. So there's a feature version of this that's kind of in my back pocket. And then I have a few other ideas that I'm just kind of in various processes of developing. I feel like as a writer, you have like 10 ideas at once, and then you just have to kind of commit to writing one.
One at a time. What do you make of, interesting, because you were in school while this was all happening, kind of what has happened with women in the industry in the last few years? How did it look from your perspective as you were in film school and preparing to, be launched out into the industry?
Yeah, it's funny because before everything kind of like came crashing down with like Harvey Weinstein and all of that, like I never really like thought about it. It's weird because like I was aware that women didn't really make movies, historically, and it's still very much a male dominated profession. But I was like, well, I'm going to be a director and it doesn't matter that I'm like a woman. But then I sort of became more aware of it after, like I said, everything happened with Harvey Weinstein, and then that just kind of, the floodgates just kind of opened. And it's not like, those issues weren't around before. And then I really started becoming aware of it. And I think like, just hearing other women sharing their stories or even just reading stuff online about things that have happened. And I think I've been very fortunate in that I haven't really experienced like really just abject like sexism when I've, been filmmaking. And I think, that's not to say it doesn't happen. I'm just saying that I think I've been fortunate and, just kind of surrounded myself with good people. But I think the trick for, us female filmmakers going forward is to just tell our stories and be, as honest and determined about that as possible, and kind of not letting anything stop us, and just being determined, being persistent. And, and then our voices will be heard. And I'm really, delighted to see that, more films made by, female directors are, getting mainstream recognition. And just like, being able to see that and being able to see other women succeed. The first one that comes to mind is Greta Gerwig, getting her Best Director nomination for Lady Bird. And it's very empowering for me to see other women succeed and to see female, focused films of all kinds, everything from, Wonder Woman to Lady Bird to, I don't know.
Booksmart.
Little Women. Yeah, Booksmart. So that's very empowering for me. And I think we just have to keep at it and let our voices be heard.
Now, tell me, what was the kind of the gender makeup when you were in film school? Was it pretty 50-50?
It was pretty 50-50.
Yeah, that's the mystery because film school is. And then, 10 years down the line, things have shifted so dramatically. But it's great because to hear, it sounds like you're pretty undaunted.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I try to be. I feel like, it's the only way to really be, at least for me personally, because I felt like if I let myself think about, these issues too much, I think it would overwhelm me. And I don't want to be overwhelmed. I just want to tell the best stories that I possibly can and, use my voice as, a young woman and growing up in the world and use my voice to just bring a unique perspective to those stories.
Wonderful. You just have to stay focused and do your work. What advice do you have for young women coming up behind you?
Oof. I would say just to keep, like I said, just to keep at it, to tell the stories that you want to tell and don't let anybody tell you that it's not possible because it is possible. And I look to a lot of my own inspirations and, they all kind of say the same thing is it's like the second you tell yourself something is impossible, then that's what it becomes. But like if you really believe in something, kind of like I believe in this story that I just told and, like I do about all of the films that I've made in college and, even stuff that I've just written, like shorts, like prose, I believe in them and the characters and their journeys and what they have to teach other people. So I think the key is just passion because passion is infectious. And I was just listening to it's a podcast series about how they made Star Wars, and I almost I was on the verge of tears at certain points in the script, and I'm not ashamed to admit that because I get emotional about these sorts of things. But George Lucas had this vision for this film that he wanted to make, and he believed in its power and the effect that it could have on people. And just in the face of just rejection and, the film going over budget and nobody really believing in it and Fox wanting to pull the plug, he kept at it. And look where Star Wars is today.
Yeah.
And you could say, yeah, he's a multi-billionaire, but I think that's sort of beside the point. That's kind of an added bonus. It's just he told the story that he really believed in, and it's, one of the most successful movies of all time, and it's just resonated with and inspired so many people. And Walt Disney is the same. With Snow White, nobody thought in, 1938 that anybody would sit down for a feature cartoon because the cartoons in those days were, Tom and Jerry and, the Looney Tunes and of course, Mickey Mouse. But, he believed in the story that he wanted to tell and, he just kept at it and nobody thought it was a good idea. And, it was one of the most successful movies of all time. And, its success inspired The Wizard of Oz and just beyond that, just started a whole new industry of animation that wouldn't have been there if Snow White hadn't been a success.
Yeah. What would you point to as your inspiration?
So there's a lot of different things. I think Disney, Walt Disney certainly is one. I would say Jim Henson is another. And it's interesting because I don't really want to make animated movies or movies about puppets, but just this almost childlike innocence of really, really telling stories that, can reach a lot of people and have an effect on people. And I think it's just the passion with those two in particular is what I'm really attached to, and the characters that they created are so endearing and especially Kermit the Frog in recent years. The Muppets is something that I grew up with because my dad grew up with it, and then he exposed me to it. And Kermit the Frog is just somebody, he was a parallel for Jim Henson himself, and he was just always Kermit is the leader of this ragtag group of people that all just have a dream that they believe in, and they're just trying to get this dream out to people. And he's barely holding it together, but he does. And I think the movies that I saw as a kid, like, cause even though I don't want to make children's media, the movies and TV that I watched as a kid really affected me and inspired me. And, they were the first seeds that were planted. And I think what I love about those in particular, is that I appreciated them as a child, but then I can go back and appreciate them as another level as an adult. And then if we're talking about, more recent inspirations, a director I really admire, is Sofia Coppola. I think The Virgin Suicides is one of my favorite movies, and I just love everything else she's done. And I think it's just the films that she makes are so beautiful. Another one is Agnes Varda, who I, learned about only very, very recently through a film class I took at the Emerson in LA. And I just wasn't really aware that women were out making movies in the 60s.
Right.
And just the stories. And she's a good filmmaker. And I just really resonate with her movies. My favorite is Cleo from 5 to 7. Like, that movie is just stunning. I rewatched it recently, actually. Even like certain actresses from old Hollywood, like Grace Kelly or, Audrey Hepburn, and just the fact that they were so themselves, and Grace Kelly in particular, even though she was an actress and not a filmmaker, she was just very passionate about her craft. And, her family wasn't always the most supportive of that. And, she went into the industry not thinking like she was as good as, her contemporaries or even the people that came before her, but she just really, really believed in it. And, one of my favorite pictures is her on Oscar night. And just, you can tell how happy she is and how much that moment of winning an Oscar and being recognized by her peers means to her. And she just really believed in, being an actress and, having a screen presence. And I really connect with that as well. As far as writing, it was more like adult writing. I think like Rod Serling in The Twilight Zone is really great. Just some of those episodes of that show are still like, it's like 25 minutes and it just stays with you.
Oh, I can still think of episodes from 30, 35 years ago that stick. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sure there's a ton of other people that I'm forgetting. And,
just sidebar, have you been over to Jim Henson Studios on La Brea?
I've driven by it, but I've never been in, and I saw it and I'm like, oh my God, there it is.
It's so cool.
Yeah. And like Mary Pickford, the fact that she was, a woman in the 19-teens and 1920s, and she was an actress, but, she started United Artists with, Charlie Chaplin and Douglas Fairbanks. And, she was like an equal seat at that table and was very influential in creating the Academy. And, it was kind of a pioneer, especially for women, in front of and behind the camera. And she's really amazing as well. And I look at, the history of Hollywood in particular and just how much it's changed and grown in the past century, past 120 years, really. And, the fact that, these people, they laid the path out for us and, made it possible for us. So I'm always very like cognizant of that and aware of it. And, I always just have great respect for them.
Great. Now back to you for a minute. How would you characterize your style as a filmmaker?
Yeah. So, I remember having a conversation about this with one of my, professors once. And, I think my films are they're very female focused in a way, but I think that's just my perspective, bleeding into, the stories that I feel compelled to tell. And I think it's about, so far it's all been young women and I guess young people looking for their place in the world and, coming to terms with the way the world is and, for better or for worse and finding their place in it and, finding ways to be good people and to feel loved and accepted. And I think a lot of the films I made in college have more positive endings than this one does without giving too much away. But I still think that it touches upon those same themes because my main character, she's looking for a place like I, sort of touched on where she does feel loved and accepted. And she's looking for that and she thinks she's doing the right thing. And she thinks she's, in love and, gonna do what's making her happy when she wasn't, finding that happiness before. And even though things don't turn out well for her or for anyone, really. I mean, it's a tough story to tell, but I think it's an important story to tell. And I think what it touches on is why people get drawn into these sorts of things in the first place.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Like as you're watching them drive off a cliff.
Absolutely. It's funny. One movie I watched, because I watched a lot of movies, from the 60s or about the 60s and just things that kind of had thematic similarities. And one movie I thought, and I haven't read the book, but I thought had a lot of that same idea of this is a really difficult story to tell, but it's an important one and I think needs to be told was the Stanley Kubrick Lolita. And I watched that movie and I really liked it. And I was kind of unsure about it going in, but I think it was a very, for the subject matter, I thought it dealt with it very, respectfully and very, carefully. And I thought the lead actress, she was really good. And I think she was actually 14 when they filmed it. And you can really tell, she acts like a 14-year-old girl. And they really play with these power dynamics of, how this narrator, this main character, how he, abuses her and is just really a creepy kind of monster. And, but they also show us kind of what she sees too. And then eventually she does, she is able to break free from that. And I think, like I said, it's a very difficult story and that movie doesn't have a happy ending either, but it's kind of like one of those where it's like, okay, well, I'm glad the story was told and I'm glad that, I watched it. And that's kind of the same feeling I want to get out of this piece.
Now, tell us what it's called.
It's called Eagle Rock.
Oh, that's right. Eagle Rock. And then are you planning to do the festival circuit when you're done?
I think so. Yeah. So my editor and my editor is, also my DP, on a low budget film, you, wear a lot of hats. So he and I and, my producer a little bit too, we're just kind of looking at the best festivals that we can submit this to. And that's something that I'm very much looking forward to and excited about. I didn't really do that with any of my films in college and, just the opportunity to get the film seen and be able to have conversations with people about it and watching people respond to it is something that, I'm very excited about and I'm very much looking forward to because, that's the reason we're in this is, you know, I feel like it's so our films can have impacts on other people. And on a certain level, I do make the films that I would want to see myself. But, on another level, it's because I know that people will respond to them. I think that's the power of filmmaking. So that's a part of the process and I'm very excited about. And, we're starting to think about it now. So, yes, festival circuit is very much on the agenda.
Great. Well, I hope that you will keep in touch so we can keep tabs on your progress and then see it when we have the opportunity.
Absolutely.
Eleanor, thank you so much for doing this. It was so great to talk to you.
Of course. So if you want to follow the progress of the film, you can, we're most active on Instagram. It's at Eagle Rock Short and we post stills and news. And I love interacting with people on the Instagram. So give us a follow there.
Oh, that's great. Okay. Thank you.
Cool.
You've been listening to The Other 50%, a herstory of Hollywood. I'm Julie Harris Walker. I'd like to thank Eleanor Wells for sharing her story. And special thanks to Jay Rowe, Danny Rosner, and Allison McQuaid for the music. Please find us on your favorite podcast provider and leave a review. And of course, on our website, theother50%.com, all spelled out, for added features, bios of our guests, and the merch. You can also follow us on all the social media platforms and go subscribe at catchabreakpodcast.com. Thanks for listening. See you next time.